Hello fellow YouTubers, this is Nick from NLB Solutions, and today I'm going to show you how you can add a domain controller to an existing domain, and after that using the Inter-Site Replication to replicate Active Directory data between domain controllers that are not physically located into the same location. In this video I'm going to create a new Windows server which is running Windows Server 2012 R2 operating system. I'm going to join that server to my domain, and this server is going to be called NLB-DC-02. After that, while I'm joining and restarting my server, I'm going to show you a quick overview of Active Directory sites and services and how you can separate your servers when they are not physically located into the same location, so that you will have the functionality of the inter-site replication between your Active Directory servers. After my joining to my NLB Lab domain is finished, I'm going to continue with installing ntds services on my new DC, and I'm going to promote it as a domain controller. But instead of creating a new forest, I'm going to add it to my existing nlblab.com domain, so that it will be a read-write domain controller within my nlblab.com domain. After the promotion is done, I'm going to check the initial AD replication and we'll see if my Active Directory has all the objects that are on my root domain controller, and if my DNS replicated the information as well. I'm going to show you how you can use the repadmin command to replicate and force replication to your domain controllers, and how you can check if there are any problems with your current replication between your DCs. After we are finished with the repadmin command, I'm going to force an inter-site replication just to test if I, for example, create a user on my first domain controller, if that user would appear on my second one, and vice versa. So, there are a few prerequisites that you need to configure before you can start with this training session. You need 2 Windows servers. In my case they are NLB-DC-01 and 02. You will need an existing Active Directory domain, in my case nlblab.com. You will need to have 2 Active Directory sites to create the inter-site replication. Of course, if you don't want to make an inter-site replication, you can stick with the intra-site, and basically the information will replicate much faster instead of waiting for 180 minutes, which is the default time for the inter-site. So I've created a main office and a branch office, and you need to have 2 subnets and of course routing between them. In my case it's 10.0.0, which is a 24-bit subnet, and 192.168.1.0, again a 24-bit subnet. So let's start with the demonstration. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into my new server. My server manager will load. And in here you can see that this server is in a different subnet. It's in 192.168.1.0, and if I log into my primary domain controller, I'll have to wait for my server manager to load. In here I currently have the 10.0.0.0 subnet. So now that I've placed my domain controller, or the future domain controller, on a different subnet, I'm going to join it to my domain. That's nlblab.com. It will ask me for credentials. It will be admin. Okay, I've joined it to the domain. And in order for you to see and to connect the two subnets between each other, you must have a routing enabled. And for example, in on the job situation, you will most probably have a site-to-site VPN. So let's imagine that I currently in my main office, where my main domain controller is, I have the 10.0.0 subnet, and that subnet connects to the 192.168.1.0 using a site-to-site VPN, so that I can join my server to the domain and later promote it to a domain controller, which is going to be on a different site. I'm going to show you where exactly you can set that and split the sites in Active Directory, and you can assign different subnets to the different sites. So let me restart my machine now, and I'm going to pause the video, and I'm going to continue when my machine is up and running. While my other server is starting up, I will go to my primary domain controller in my domain, and will show you where exactly I've configured the settings for the sites and services. So if you go to Tools, Active Directory, Sites and Services, and wait for it to load. I will maximize this so you can see. In here you can see that I have a branch office and a main office. So in my main office currently I have the NLB DC01, which is my root domain controller, the first domain controller of my domain. And in the branch office, when I promote the second domain controller, it will appear here. As you can see, I've created two subnets that will locate my servers between my branch office and my main office. So I've assigned the 10.0.0 subnet to my main office and the 192.168.1.0 to my branch office. So now, after I go to my other future domain controller and log into it, instead of using the local admin, I'm going to use my domain admin account. Log into the server. Now that my server is loading up my server manager, I will wait for it to fully load, and I will proceed with adding the Active Directory domain services role, and later promoting it to a domain controller. But instead of creating a new forest, I'm going to add to an existing domain. So I'm going to promote this DC. It will be a part of my existing nlblab.com domain, and we'll later go ahead and replicate all the information from my main server. Now that my server manager is loading, I can proceed with adding roles and services. It's still collecting inventory data, so I will have to wait for a moment. Okay, and now I'm going to proceed with adding a role-based installation. Click Next and select the option to install Active Directory and adding all the features that are required for the Active Directory domain services, and click Next. Once again, I don't want any other features, and I'm going to install. So while this is installing, I'm going to switch to my primary server, and I will show you where you have the Inter-Site transports settings. So the inter-site transport settings is basically configuring the communication between different site locations. So we have an intra-site, which is domain controllers within a single site, within a single location, and you can configure them how to communicate between each other, or you can go ahead and, if like in my situation I have the branch office and the main office, I will use the inter-site transport and will use the IP transport. So I have a default site link that is pre-configured by my Active Directory, and if I go to properties, I can see that currently in my default site link I have my branch office and my main office, and you can see that the cost is 100. This is the default cost, and the replication occurs every 180 minutes. So you can understand that between sites, when you have a remote sites that are connecting with one link, the domain controllers will have some time between replicating the changes, and you can even configure a schedule. For example, if you want, currently I have the replication 24/7, but if you want the replication to occur during specific time of the day, you can set it from here. You can of course modify the replication and when to occur. So I'm going to leave the defaults here, and we'll go ahead and see it's still installing. So let me pause the video. When this is done, I'm going to proceed with promoting my server to a domain controller. Now that my wizard finished the installation, I'm going to close it, and on the top you can see that it's asking us for post-deployment configuration. So I'm going to promote this server as a domain controller, and now instead of going with add a new forest, I'm going to add the domain controller to an existing domain, and the domain is nlblab.com, and the credentials that is going to be used to do this operation is going to be my nlb.admin. I'm sorry. So I know that this is a domain admin and enterprise admin, so it will be able to add it. I'm going to click next. So now that my first deployment configuration page is finished, I'm going to be asked to specify what are the capabilities for this domain controller. So I want this domain controller to be a domain name system server, a DNS server, a global catalog, and here you have the option now to select a read-only domain controller. So for example, Microsoft are basically advising us, if you have a site that is a non-secure site and you have non-IT people there, it's better to go with read-only domain controller. And basically you will see that in most scenarios, Microsoft, when you see a branch office, they will advise to use read-only domain controller. But in this case I'm going to go with read and write, because I know that I'm going to control both sites, and this is just for testing purposes. The next step is to create the directory services restore mode password. And if you remember, the directory services restore mode will help us if something happens with this domain controller and the Active Directory. For example, if the database of the Active Directory is corrupted, it will not be able to start. So what we need is, we need to boot into this mode and try to check the database, try to fix it. The site name, because I've pre-configured my server to be with within the subnet 192.168.1.0, it's currently detecting under the Active Directory sites and services that for this subnet I have the branch office site configured. So it's automatically saying, hey, you have a server that is going to be and it's using this IP, so I assume that you want this to be in the branch office site. So of course I'm going to accept that and click next. We're going to click next for the DNS delegation. And now if you have the install from media options, you can go ahead and install your DC from media. So for example, if you have a remote site and where the connection to this remote site is not really good, what you can do is you can make this install from media on a thumb flash drive or on a CD, and it will basically write all the information from my Active Directory so that it's not needed to replicate the initial replication, it's not needed to go through the one connection. So instead of trying to replicate from the one connection to my main office, it's going to use this to pre-populate my Active Directory on this domain controller. The other option is to replicate from any domain controller or from my, because I have only one domain controller that is currently on my domain, I can specify this option. But I'm going to stick with the defaults and I'm going to click next. Now it's going to ask me where to store the database, the Active Directory database, the ntds.dit file, and alongside with the log files that are going with the database, and the sysvo folder. I'm going to stick with the defaults and click next. And now it's going to show me what it's going to execute, which scripts it's going to use to configure my domain controller. If you want, you can view the script and you can save it. So if you have multiple branch offices, you can use on a later state to promote them using this script. So I'm going to click next, and it's going to check the prerequisites to see if my server is capable of working as a domain controller. So this is going to take some time. Okay, now this is finished. I can see that all the checks passed successfully, so I don't have any critical errors preventing me from promoting this server to a domain controller, and I'm going to click install. During the installation, it's going to replicate all of the information from my main server, and it's going to replicate the schema, the configuration partition, and all the DNS. It will try to replicate the DNS settings, so I'm waiting for that to finish. And now it will go ahead and will restart my server. So I'm going to close the window, close this one. It will start restarting in a second. So again, I'm going to pause the video, and when my server is up and running, we can continue and see if I have a fully functional Active Directory. Now that my server is up and running once again, I'm going to log into it using my NLB admin. And on the left side I can see that I have the ADDS installed and the DNS installed. I'm going to open my tools and then go to Active Directory users and computers. And if I open my Active Directory, I can see that I have the nlblab.com domain. Under that I can see that I have my organizational unit for NLB solutions. I have all the computers, security groups, and the servers, and my trainees organizational unit alongside with my trainees and with my security group. So the replication finished successfully. I'm going to check my DNS to see if it was able to replicate my zone, NLB lab, and I can see that my zone is there. I have my primary DC and my branch office DC as well. Let me close that. I'm going to open my Active Directory sites and services. Okay, while this is loading, I can go ahead and switch to my primary domain controller and log into it. It logged. And now if I refresh the console from here, I can see that under servers in my branch office site I have my server NLB-DC-02, so this is fully operational now. Let me see on my second server. If I expand sites, I have the branch office, the main office, and both servers on the different locations. So what I'm going to do now, just for testing purposes, I'm going to open my Active Directory users and computers, and I'm going to create a new user. So let's create a new user. This user will be called, let's say, Dave. Dave will be a user within my branch office, so I'm going to create that. I'm going to specify a password for Dave. I'm going to click next and finish. And now I have created Dave, and he's currently residing on my primary domain controller. If I go to my branch office DC and open users and computers, if I refresh that, Dave is not here. And this is because, as I explained before, the replication, the inter-site replication, will occur every single 180 minutes. So if I want to replicate this and replicate it faster than it's going to take, I should go ahead and use a command to force a replication between my domain controllers, and you can do this by opening a PowerShell or a command prompt, run it as administrator, and now I will show you the command repadmin and show replication switch. In here I can see that currently my domain controllers are communicating between each other, and the replication was successful. Now the last attempt was never, but if you have any problems with the replication where some users from your main site are not replicating correctly, this is the command that you most probably will use to see at the first place, to see if all the replication links are working fine and are successful. In my past experience I had few problems with replication failing, and I found what exactly was the problem using this command. So to force a replication, I will use the switch sync all, and it will say that the sync all terminated with no errors. So I'm going to show replication once again. I don't see any errors here. Let me go to my other DC. Let me try to refresh. It's still not here. Let me try to run that from here as well. and use rep admin sync all, press enter. It will say that it terminated with no errors. Let me check the replication links. Okay, and I can see that yeah, the last attempt was successful. Here I can see that I have a timestamp on where the replication was done. Let me try to refresh once again. It's still not there. It will take some time to fully replicate. Another thing that I could try when my replication is not occurring is I can go to Sites and Services. I'll wait for the Sites and Services console to load. Okay, and under my branch office servers, if I expand the NOB DC02 and go to the ntds settings, I can see that I currently have a connection which is was automatically generated when the initial configuration was done. And in here I can see from which server is my NOB DC02 replicating the data. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to right click it and click replicate now. And it's going to say that it forces the connection and will attempt to replicate all the information that is missing. So if I go to Active Directory users and computers, refresh, I can see that Dave now appeared on my second domain controller. And if I go to my PowerShell, I can show replicate once again, and we'll see that the replication occurred 1 minute ago, so it was fully successful. And just to test and see if my second read-write domain controller is working, I'm going to open Dave's account, and under description we'll say that he is a branch administrator, and apply that. So now I can see here that for Dave I have description branch administrator, but if I switch to my root domain controller, if I refresh, the branch admin information is still missing. So what I'm going to do, if I open the PowerShell and run repadmin show replications, it will say that it was never run here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Sites and Services, and if I go to my main office and ntds settings, I can see that now, so if you saw in my last example, if I wanted to replicate the information to my second domain controller, I went ahead under the second domain controller ntds settings, and I've replicated the information from my first one. So for this, if I want to replicate from the second to the first, I'm going to open the ntds settings for my first domain controller, and to replicate now from my second DC. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to check the show replication, and I can see that it's making some additional connections now, and the replication occurred within the minute. I'm going to open my users and computers, and I'm going to refresh, and now I can see that Dave is his description attribute has been populated with branch administrator. So I can confirm now that my replication between my sites is fully operational, and I have two fully operating domain controllers within my environment. So this is the overview of how you can promote a domain controller, assign it to a different site, and then promote it as a DC and check the replication between the two DCs if it's fully functional. So I hope that you will be able to learn something from this video. If you have any questions of how you can route the traffic between the two domain controllers, you can ask me on the comment section below. Or if you have any other questions or any other problems when promoting your second domain controller, you can again ask me. And I want to thank you very much for viewing. If you can, please subscribe, and see you soon.